Was Obama the ringleader behind weaponizing the Department of Justice and FBI on behalf of Hillary Clinton? Well, new texts seem to indicate that was the case. New texts have surfaced between FBI's Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, in which they say, quote, POTUS wants to know everything we're doing. This is when they were preparing talking points for James Comey to brief then President Barack Obama. Now, this may be out of context, but when you look at the totality of everything, of all the evidence we now have that's been publicly released, we don't even know what the Office of Inspector General has in their report. I'm being told by people inside DOJ and FBI that the Inspector General has nearly 1.5 million documents related to this investigation. And that's believable. A lot of paper is generated in the federal government, especially by agencies like DOJ and FBI. So that's really not an inconceivable number. That's a pretty standard number in terms of documents and information generated in an investigation this massive that went this deep. Remember, the OIG's investigation has been going on for well over a year. That's pretty standard filing. Those are pretty standard filings for an investigation of that scope, of that magnitude. But these texts are really, really mind-blowing. This quote, like I said, POTUS wants to know everything we're doing. Page wrote that to Strzok in September of 2016. Now, there's really, really damaging information to Strzok and Page, to Comey, to Andrew McCabe. So there's a text on September 28th, 2016, where Peter Strzok writes to Lisa Page. Let me read you this. Quote, got called up to Andy's, Andrew McCabe's, earlier, meaning his office. Hundreds of thousands of emails turned over by Weiner's attorney. We mean Anthony Weiner, Carlos Danger, convicted pedophile, Huma Abedin's husband. Turned over by Weiner's attorney to SDNY. That's the Southern District of New York. That's the federal jurisdiction in Manhattan that covers a good portion of New York. You also have the Eastern District of New York that covers Long Island, areas like Brooklyn, things of that nature. 2 districts in New York that cover good portions of the state and the lower part of the state. Because of the population, they need 2 districts there. By Weiner's attorney to SDNY, Southern District of New York, includes a ton of material from spouse, obviously Huma Abedin, sending team up tomorrow to review. This will never end. Now, this is all part of a Senate report. But it wasn't until a full month later. So that text was generated on September 28, 2016, but it wasn't until October 28th of 2016, a full month later, that James Comey informed Congress of the new emails on Weiner's laptop and the need to reopen the Hillary Clinton email investigation. Now, what we now know from our sources, what this seems to validate, is that McCabe didn't tell anybody. McCabe didn't tell anyone. McCabe didn't tell anyone. In fact, Fox News asks that exact question. They write, the question becomes why Comey was only informed by his investigative team on October 27th if the Clinton emails on Weiner's laptop were discovered by September 28th at the latest. So they could have been discovered September 15th. This gap can be longer, but we know there was about a 3-week to a month window that McCabe and his immediate, we'll call them cronies, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, etc. We know there was at least a 3-week gap. Could have been a month gap. In the time they found him, they notified Comey. Comey notified Congress, presumably notified Department of Justice as well. What was happening in that 3-week window? What were McCabe and Strzok, now admitted Hillary operatives, doing? Look, there are more texts between Strzok and Page that are really, really concerning. On Election Day, and these two are about the worst I've read. About the worst I've read. On Election Day 2016, Page writes to Strzok, OMG, oh my God, this is effing terrifying. They're, of course, talking about Donald Trump being elected to the presidency in all caps. These are 2 senior people at the FBI. Wait till I tell you what they said about people in the state of Virginia, about Republican voters in the state of Virginia. We'll get there in a second. OMG, this is effing terrifying. Then Strzok replies. Now, remember who Strzok is. Strzok is a senior counterintelligence agency at the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And he writes, OMG, I am so depressed. He's depressed that Trump won the presidency. Now, what Page wrote is even worse. It's even worse. Remember, she's a senior attorney reporting to James Comey, reporting to Andrew McCabe, reporting to Jim Rybicki, who's now left, former FBI chief of staff. She writes, quote, and this is mind-blowing, I bought all the president's men. Figure I need to brush up on Watergate. Is that an admission by Lisa Page that they're involved in a conspiracy to take down the then president-elect who will become the sitting president after Inauguration Day? I mean, it sure seems like it. We're reading it. We're not making this up. We're not floating conspiracy theories. They wrote it. It's in black and white right there. Incredible. They go on to insult voters in Virginia when they're talking about Andrew McCabe's wife, Jill McCabe's race for Virginia State Senate, which she lost. They talk about Loudoun County, Virginia, how it was about to turn blue, but that the voters there, people there, presumably the Republican voters, were, quote, ignorant hillbillies. This is how two senior people at the unbiased, integrity, fidelity, bravery, integrity is the FBI motto. These are two senior people calling American voters ignorant hillbillies because they didn't vote for their far-left boss's far-left wife for a state Senate seat, which Clinton fixer Terry McAuliffe gave her $700,000 worth of PAC money and donations and support. This is really problematic. Now, we've got hundreds of thousands of bits of information. The OIG presumably has a million plus more. When you fit these pieces together, it becomes really, really troubling. So let's jump over to another issue. Representative Trey Gowdy was doing an interview with Martha McCallum on Fox News in which he implied very strongly, and I'll read you what Gowdy said, that Sidney Blumenthal, friend of the Clintons, good friend of the Clintons, worked in the Clinton White House. Sidney Blumenthal provided information to Christopher Steele. Now, if a FISA judge was presented with the dossier and there was information within that was provided by a friend of Hillary Clinton's, not an investigator, not an official government source, not an official foreign government source, not something vetted and verified. Remember, Comey called the dossier salacious and unverified. But if a FISA judge wasn't told, hey, Your Honor, part of this information comes from a friend of the opposing candidate of the team we're asking for warrants on, well, that's one of the worst things I've ever heard. I tell you, I've been analyzing in law enforcement, contracting with or analyzing for 25 years. Never heard of anything that bad. I have never heard of anything that egregious. So here's what Trey Gowdy said when being interviewed. He says, quote, when you hear who the source, one of the sources of that information is, you're going to think, oh my gosh, I've heard that name somewhere before. Where could it possibly have been? Now, he's being a bit snarky. I like it. He was asked by Martha McCallum, was it a foreign source? And Gowdy said, no, it's a domestic source. And he said this, and this was great. He said, quote, I'm trying to think of how Secretary Clinton defined him. I think she said he was an old friend who emailed her from time to time. That's, of course, referring to Sidney Blumenthal. So McCallum said, well, are we talking about Sidney Blumenthal? And Gowdy said, that would be really warm. You're warm. Look, it doesn't take a master investigator to see what went on here. The dossier was junk. But it's very interesting that Trey Gowdy, a guy who's typically very careful, a former prosecutor. Now I'm 50-50 on Trey Gowdy. Sometimes I think he's all bark and no bite. Other times he comes out and he surprises me with this, but he's really disappointed me in his support, his daily support for Mueller. Unless he's covering himself for a move he's about to make back in the justice system. I'm really not sure on that one, and sources I talk to really don't know. Gowdy is playing it very close to the vest. He's not telling anybody where he really stands or what his next moves are. Some people think he's going back into the private sector to make money. Some people think he's in line for attorney general. Others think he's up for a federal judgeship. But the man is playing it very close to the vest, and the White House really isn't talking. So, and believe me, I am poking around. I am trying to find out what Gowdy's next move is. I'm very interested, but no luck so far. When I have something concrete, I'm bringing it right on the show. But until then, I don't want to give you inaccurate information. But there's a bigger problem at play here. Gowdy goes on to talk about the State Department weaponizing against Donald Trump. State Department is institutionally left. State Department was in its glory days under the neocons, the globalists like George H.W. Bush and George Bush. And it was in even more glory days, bigger glory days under Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. But Trump's America First policies don't do that for the State Department. If anything, they shrink its power. He's always at odd ends with Rex Tillerson, a globalist. Turned out to be a terrible pick for Secretary of State. But I don't think Trump really cares much about the State Department. He's focused on the Department of Defense, on the Department of the Treasury, Homeland Security, his intelligence community, fixing the law enforcement community. He's letting the State Department do what they do, and he's reining them in. And I think that's why Trump hasn't filled many of those appointments. You know, people were excoriating him. There are 4,000 open appointments. Trump doesn't know what he's doing. Well, I think he does know what he's doing. I think he looked at the size of government bureaucracy and said, we really need 4,000 bodies in these jobs. Maybe these jobs can be done with 1,500 bodies, 2,000 bodies. He's got some pretty smart finance minds around him who look at that government inefficiency and say, well, why do we have 6 people doing the job of 1? Let's hold off a second here. Let's fix some of these big problems. Then we'll come back to these appointments and these personnel issues and see if we even need all these people. Well, that terrifies an institutionally left organization like the State Department, agency like the State Department. The more bodies under them, the more powerful they are. The bigger their agenda, the bigger their mission, the more powerful they are. You threaten somebody's power, come back at you. And that's really the definition of deep state, right? Just not some conspiratorial dark room. It's just a bunch of institutional employees who like their power. And when someone threatens that power, they rebel. But I will tell you this. These texts are now damning. This could be, well, I think this is the greatest scandal in American history. And it needs to be reported as such. I bring it to you every day. And I'm bringing it to you every day because new stuff is breaking every day. This is, to me, this attacks our foundations. It goes to the heart of our republic. And we need to tell this story. It's a story we need to tell because it's a story you need to know about. If you like this incredibly important content as much as I love bringing it to you, please subscribe to our premium service at www.therebel.media/shows. Don't forget to check out my new hour-long show, Off the Cuff Declassified. We go deeper into these issues, have great guests every day. Guarantee you're going to love it. If you're already a subscriber, thank you so much. And thank you very much for watching. I will be back with you tomorrow.